Just before Obama left office, he sent $1.7 billion in cash to Iran. The money was delivered in actual cash, stacked on pallets and flown into the country.
They could not tell me who, when the wire transfer was made to the bank in Switzerland and then converted into cash, who received that cash on those wooden pallets before it was loaded on a cargo plane in Tehran. And on the other end, in Tehran, who received, what top Iranian officials? Were they from the military? Were they from the economic development folks? Who received the cash at the other end?
Who specifically made the decision to make this payment in cash?
I cannot speak to who made the decision to make it in cash. What I can tell you is that it was the determination of the people that had to facilitate this payment.
Was it a condition of the Iranian government, or was it a decision of the United States Department of State?
Obama negotiated the disastrous Obama-Iran nuclear deal that flooded billions of dollars into Iran. Look, what happened on Saturday started under Barack Obama.
A Republican congressional report says the Obama administration deliberately misled Congress and the public in its efforts to funnel billions of dollars to Iran as part of the nuclear deal.
Let's get at it. Let's get at it. Let's get talking about it. So, of course, we all saw what happened on Saturday. The U.S. struck Iran's nuclear capabilities, and as far as we know, they've completely decimated and thrown them back into the Stone Age. Well, let's talk about how we actually got here, which I think is appropriate that we can talk about that now, as we are hopefully on the other side of this. So let's bring this in and let's talk about how we actually got here.
Obama negotiated the disastrous Obama-Iran nuclear deal that flooded billions of dollars into Iran. Look, what happened on Saturday started under Barack Obama because he flooded the cash into that regime to enable them to start building nuclear weapons. And then under Joe Biden, it accelerated. Joe Biden lifted all the sanctions, refused to enforce the sanctions, and over $100 billion flowed into Iran as a result of the Democrats' foreign policy. That money, over 90% of the money from Hamas comes from Iran. Over 90% of the money from Hezbollah comes from Iran. The October 7th death squads in Israel were, in a very real sense, paid for by Iran. And so when President Trump came in, the world had gotten much, much more dangerous. Iran was on the verge of acquiring nuclear weapons. And it's important to understand what happened Saturday night. It was about protecting our ally Israel, yes, but it was even more so about protecting America. Those nuclear weapons, Iran, the Ayatollah is developing ICBMs. That stands for Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. You don't need an ICBM to go from Iran to Israel. They're firing ballistic missiles. They don't necessarily understand it, and the Democrats are dishonest about it. The Democrats right now, today's Democrat Party, hates Israel. So when we're engaged in military conflict with Iran, they say it's all Israel, all Israel. An ICBM, the only reason the Ayatollah wants an ICBM is to travel across the Atlantic and to detonate a nuclear warhead right where you and I are right now in New York City. I believe if they had a nuclear weapon, the odds are unacceptably high, they would use it to murder millions of Americans. The Ayatollah tells us what he thinks. He routinely chants death to America. He refers to Israel as the little Satan. He refers to the United States as the great Satan.
Meanwhile, the Obama administration is still taking a whole lot of heat for a $400 million cash payment to Iran. The transfer coincided with the release of 4 American prisoners. The White House insists that this was not a ransom payment, illegal under U.S. law, but rather part of a separate legal settlement that in fact dated back to 1979, though some lawmakers are not satisfied with that argument.
Meanwhile, confirming today that just 2 days after steering $400 million in cash to Iran in a covert payment timed to coincide with the release of American hostages, President Obama and his administration paid the Islamic Republic 3 times that amount, another $1.3 billion in interest, wiring that money directly to Iran in 3 payments. The payments trace back to the 1970s and money Iran gave the U.S. for military equipment before the hostage crisis of that era erupted. And the U.S. responded back then by freezing Iran's assets.
Now, in response to a report in the New York Sun, the Obama administration has confirmed that it was just 2 days later, on January 19th, that a Treasury Department account known as the Judgment Fund was used to send Iran an additional 13 payments, each for $99,999,999.99, or roughly $100 million each, to satisfy the interest that Washington negotiated with Iran.
Wow.
The U.S. said the total payout of $1.7 billion was significantly lower than the judgment U.S. taxpayers might have been forced to absorb if Iran prevailed in the international tribunal in which it has staked its claim to the assets frozen back in the 70s. However, the State Department today refused to provide additional information about the unusual amounts used, why hard foreign currency was used for the initial payment, or why the ledger shows a 14th payment in the amount of nearly $10.4 million.
We do make a practice of not commenting publicly on transactions, including settlement payments, due to the confidential nature of those payments and to respect the privacy of our international partners.
We want to know who authorized this. We want to know when. We want to know the timing. And we also want to know the particulars about the cash and the payments. Why unmarked bills when other avenues were possible in terms of satisfying whatever interests the government may have had?
Who specifically made the decision to make this payment in cash?
I cannot speak to who made the decision to make it in cash. What I can tell you is that it was the determination of the people that had to facilitate this payment.
Was it a condition of the Iranian government, or was it a decision of the United States Department of State?
The condition of the deal was that there would be immediate payment. We knew that Iran had critical economic needs that it had to address immediately.
Certainly there are other ways to make an immediate payment other than a middle of the night, what appears to be a drug drop.
We have seen difficulties with global banks being willing to engage in these particular transactions, and this was the way, this was the mechanism that we felt we could guarantee immediate payment.
They needed the cash, and they needed it fast. And a wired transfer, which would be very difficult to do, supposedly with Iran, unless you work through a number of third parties, wasn't feasible. So obviously you do the next best thing, and you put a lot of cash in a crate on a private jet. And if that doesn't do the trick, you get $1.3 billion more in cash in follow-up private jets, because $1.7 billion in total, you'd need like a C-5 Freak NA. Anyway, it's a little weird, but it is what it is.
That is crazy work.
Not so much about
where'd that money go?
There, $1.7 billion, but that it's all in cash. It does seem weird.
You know, this doesn't make any sense. You know, it would, if it's not so serious, it would sound silly. Here you have a government that is one of the chief sponsors of terrorism in the world. That has vowed to wipe Israel off the face of the earth and kill as many Americans as possible, and they already have blood on their hands. And we go through the settlement process and wire $1.7 billion of cash, which is the currency of terrorism, to the chief sponsor of terrorism.
But even laying aside the motives for that, the other part of this, and probably the more crucial for the time being, the quid pro quo, that they say this is not ransom, but it's coincidental, and that is money that was due Iran from a freeze that goes back to the early days of the Carter administration, and that they were simply making sure they made good on that and had nothing to do with releasing those hostages. Do you believe that?
It doesn't. No, it doesn't smell. It doesn't smell right, Neil. There's about $400 million.
Well, what if it weren't cash? What if it weren't cash? What if it was like I don't know, just a check?
A check
well,
is
here's
crazy.
The problem is that there was nothing in the sanctions at the time of the transfer in January that prevented this money from being wired, but they chose cash. So it begs to ask the question, where, you know, as I mentioned, cash is the currency of terrorism. It's untraceable, it's very fungible, it can be used by anybody for any purpose. So why
who insisted on the cash? Do you know, Congressman? Is that our way of saying, all right, this is an incentive for you, cynically, to get these hostages to us, or that is the currency, no pun intended, just the cash, to do what they want to do, because cash is king?
Well, they didn't answer the questions, so we still don't know this answer, and we absolutely grilled them on this question. Who asked for that cash? Was it the government of Iran that asked for the cash? Why was it in cash? You didn't have to do it that way. You could have wire transferred it. Here's the other problem.
Well, they say you can't. I don't know if this is true. They say you can't unless it's to third parties like the Swiss or whatever. They set it up, and then it goes to Tehran because we don't have that relationship with Tehran. Do you know what the case is?
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing in law that prevented a direct transfer from a bank in America to a bank in Tehran. And if they couldn't work it out, take a little bit more time. They've been working on this for 37 years. And why was the transfer, Neil, on the exact same day that 5 American hostages were released? Now, we're glad to have the hostages home, don't get me wrong, but it looks like to me that this was part of a ransom payment for those hostages.
That is crazy if it's true.
Increases the risk for Americans abroad when, gee, if we can get a ransom for these 5, what about the next people that we kidnap? It does not look good, and they did not provide us with the answers we asked. Neil, if I can mention one more thing. They could not tell me who, when the wire transfer was made to the bank in Switzerland and then converted into cash, who received that cash on those wooden pallets before it was loaded on a cargo plane in Tehran. And on the other end, in Tehran, who received, what top Iranian officials? Were they from the military? Were they from the economic development folks? Who received the cash at the other end? We don't even know where the cash is. It's not traceable. There is absolutely no accountable where that cash went. And this is to a government that is the chief sponsor of terrorism in the world. We've got to get to the bottom of this. This does not look good.
A Republican congressional report.
That is super wild, man. If we did that, which I remember us doing this, I do remember the conversation. This is crazy work, man. This is reckless. And it does cause you to think and wonder. You can't just be this obtuse. You can't say, oh, we just didn't know. I didn't know that you were, international terrorist. I didn't realize that. We can't say that. So again, I don't know the specifics of the deal that happened back in 1979, but given this group $1.4 billion in cash is crazy work, and we deserve what we get.
Says the Obama administration deliberately misled Congress and the public in its efforts to funnel billions of dollars to Iran as part of the nuclear deal. Correspondent Rich Edson has the specifics tonight from the State Department.
After signing the 2015 nuclear agreement, Iran had a $6 billion problem. The nuclear deal gave Iran access to its international bank accounts. One account in Oman held about $6 billion in local currency. To use it, the Iranians needed to convert that money first to U.S. dollars, then to euros. And the Obama administration was ready to help.
I think they did so because they were desperate to get a deal. So on the one hand, they were saying that the Iranians were not going to get access to the American financial system. On the other hand, they actually granted Iran a specific license to allow them to take some of the funds that had been in escrow.
A report from the Republican majority of the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations says the Obama administration bypassed existing sanctions and cleared the way for Iran to use the U.S. financial system, even as officials claimed that would never happen. The Senate report cites pledges from then Treasury Secretary Jack Lew and other top administration officials.
Iran will be denied access to the world's most important market and unable to deal in the world's most important currency.
The report says that in January 2016, Iran complained about its nearly $6 billion stuck in an Oman bank. 1 month later, the Obama Treasury Department issued a license, allowing a transaction the federal government would otherwise prohibit. Officials then tried to persuade 2 U.S. banks to execute it. The report says, quote, both U.S. banks eventually declined, primarily due to the unwillingness to take on the legal and compliance risk, but also reputational concerns in doing business with a comprehensively sanctioned country like Iran. A former administration official refused to go on record, though tells Fox News the license fulfilled U.S. commitments under the nuclear agreement to, quote, give Iran access to pools of its money held overseas. This specific license cannot be described as granting access to the U.S. financial system. As for what happened to that $6 billion in Oman, the report says Iran likely retrieved it, gradually, using European banks.
That is absolutely crazy. And when we think about how often we run into situations where we've dealt with a country, at one point they were favorable, one time they were allies, and now we're no longer dealing with them, or now they're our enemies. When was Iran ever our ally. Like, I can't understand why we would allow this. I really don't. I would love to dig deeper into this. If you understand this more, why don't you comment down below and let me know what you think about this? Had you heard about this? Do you remember these going on? Do you remember what happened back in 1979? Don't tell me how old you are. But anyway, I'd love to hear what you think about it down in the comments below. Let's keep that conversation going. Thank you so much for liking the video, and thank you so much for subscribing and helping us get closer to our goal of 50,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. And until next time, everybody, grace and peace.